Hey everybody, Nikki Burnett here, Taste Life Nutrition, functional nutritionist. I practice strategic evidence-based consulting, and we're trying to get through food allergies and sensitivities. It's taken me a little bit longer than I expected, but join me today. We're going to finish up a little bit on dairy. That's where we left off the last time. And then we'll move into what are FODMAPs, what are histamines, what can we do, what's an elimination diet, and then some testing. And so let's hit on that. Something that I tend to neglect to say, and I'm going to say it today, is this is for information only. This is not diagnostic. It's only to let you know what I know and how I practice, when I'm working with my clients and my education and my knowledge. And I just want to share with you what I have learned over the years, through conferences and just being in practice, and what it looks like when we have these sensitivities and allergies, which can be kind of a difficult thing to deal with, and they're not easy to deal with. They're also not easy to figure out, when you're having these sensitivities, specifically sensitivities, and you're dealing with inflammation and joint pain and brain fog. You don't always go to food sensitivities. So those are the things that we want to think about. Okay, so we left off the last time, and I was talking about dairy and how really deep we can go with dairy, and I just find this interesting. I want to share this. I will tell you that this is not my from my own research. That what I'm about to tell you comes from a conference that I went to, straight from the owner of the lab company, and so this is his information and his knowledge. I trust what he has to say. He's the the super scientist. But I found it just truly interesting, and I think more than anything, it's just something to take into consideration. Okay, so here's the deal with dairy. So going back to it a little bit, I think some dairy for some people can be okay. So if you have the right genetics, if you don't have any inflammatory conditions that can where dairy can make it more of an issue, make you more inflamed, because it will go down an inflammatory pathway if you're already in an inflamed state. I also believe that any dairy that's good dairy is going to be raw dairy. I don't believe that any of the dairy that's out there, if it's pasteurized, if it's been heated, processed, it is a dead food. It creates mucus in the body, and it really creates a problem for the body. So if you're someone who enjoys dairy and you think you do well with dairy and you're fine with it, I think that's great. Just, it's got to be raw, and we can't get raw in all of the states. We can get it here through a raw milk share. California, you can buy it off the shelf, which I think is amazing. But let's dig in a little bit to what's really interesting about this. So back in, let's say, the 50s, I don't know exactly, but back early in the 50s or so, when there was people were trying to determine if fat was the problem in our diets. If fat was what was increasing our disease and our cardiovascular issues and our mortality rates and all of these things. And so this actually just became a big, nasty political issue, which is a big problem when food becomes political, as far as I'm concerned. So what happened, though, was what they determined was fat was the devil, essentially. And there are basically two different cows that we get milk from. So we've got our Holstein cows, the pretty black and white cows that we see everywhere, and there's a reason for that. And then we had the smaller Guernsey cows. And so we were getting milk from both, and the Holstein cows are bigger producers with a lower fat content, whereas Guernseys are lower producers with a high fat content. So what they decided was, well, because the Holstein has lower fat and higher production, then we go with the Holstein cow. And so more and more people started utilizing the Holstein cow for their milk production, and Guernseys less and less. What is interesting is they are starting to find, they being the scientists, the people who know a heck of a lot more than I do, but there is some kind of genetic mutation in the Holstein cow. And there is some research showing that genetic mutation is creating a lot of problems in people who are drinking high amounts of milk. So think about that. I just find that really intriguing, and I'd love one day to be able to have the time to sit down and look into it and see all of the dirty details of it. But I just find that super interesting because I don't really know if we can even get much Guernsey cow milk, not commercially anyway, unless people are just producing it on their own. So I just find that super cool. I wanted to let you know and not leave you hanging if that's something that you wanted to know about, because that's kind of where I left it last time. So let's move into FODMAPs. FODMAPs are a big thing these days, and it's difficult. People are really confused about what a FODMAP is. Should I be on a low FODMAP diet? Should I be on a high FODMAP diet? What should I do? And what does it even mean? So I have to do cheat sheets on FODMAPs because it's an acronym, and it stands for their different types of starches in foods. And so it's, let's see, fermentables, oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. That's FODMAP, okay? So all of those things are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, except there are certain people with certain conditions, SIBO being one, if you've heard the term SIBO, which is another acronym for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Those starches can sit and ferment, and the bacteria, which happen to be in the wrong place in the gut, will then feed on them, and it creates just really uncomfortable bloating and gas and all kinds of nasty issues. It's not a fun thing to deal with. So what we've been told is that those people who also will have food sensitivities probably should be on a low FODMAP diet. What happens though is those starches that we're then taking out of our diet, we're taking away the starches that feed our gut bacteria. These are really, really important foods that feed our gut bacteria. And so, I mean, things like avocados, avocados are high FODMAP, and that's just, garlic and onions. They can create a lot of problems for people, but they're also just incredibly nutritious. So what we want to keep in mind with FODMAPs is how important they are and how much they feed our gut bacteria. What's interesting too, to go back to it as I'm thinking about it, is the more and more stool tests that I get back that have there's a dysbiosis or a lacking of some of the good bacteria that are supposed to be in the gut for our immunity, our mental and emotional health, for everything that we are really. There are certain bacteria that are low because they've been on a low FODMAP diet for so long when they're not supposed to be. In my mind, it's not been that long ago, but there's a time when, okay, somebody has SIBO, somebody's dealing with food allergies or food sensitivities. You put them on a low-fat diet for a period of time. Now, we don't do that at all, or we're not supposed to. People are coming to me that have been told to do that, but really it's more of a diagnostic tool. If somebody is reacting to a good amount of high FODMAP foods, then okay, we say, let's leave some of those out. Let's not create more of a problem and more discomfort, but let's, the ones that are high FODMAP that we're able to leave in, let's leave those in. It also helps us see, okay, yes, we might be dealing with a certain bacterial overgrowth that is creating the issue with the FODMAPs, and that it helps us to understand what's going on with the body. But it just really is frustrating when literally, I think I had a client come in, she's been on low FODMAP, I don't know, 2 years, and we got her stool test results back, and she's low in all of her good bacteria that these FODMAPs produce these byproducts that help our guts, things like butyrates, these short chain fatty acids, and she's not getting any of those because she's been on a low FODMAP diet for so long. So it shows. It's amazing. So anyway, this is, this just has to, I guess what I want to go back to too is just because food sensitivities aren't always just because your body is sensitive to something. There's always something else going on. And I'm going to get into this a little bit when we start talking about testing. But sensitivities are really more of an immune response to something else. Allergies, maybe a very different story, especially if there's, anaphylaxis that's associated with it. Those are lifelong. You stay away from peanuts, right? You stay away from those things that could create such severe problems, even death, which is pretty severe. Sensitivities, though, I find in many, many cases, if we find the underlying cause, which is often some kind of bacterial overgrowth or yeast overgrowth or a parasite or whatever it might be, then the food sensitivities get a lot better. Okay, so those are things that we want to keep in mind. I was going to jump ahead. It's going to jump into testing. Let's not do that yet. We'll do that here in a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about histamines. If you have any questions, I'm going to minimize this real quick. All right, so if you do have questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. So talking about histamines. So histamines are interesting. They are normal, they're natural, but we can have genetics that increase our intolerance to histamines. Histamines are neurotransmitters. They're also they're neurotransmitters in the gut, but they're foods that as they break down can also create higher histamines. So leftovers for some people who naturally don't break down histamines well can create a real histamine problem for people, which is interesting. I love leftovers, cook big batches and have it for the week. I think it's great. But some people can't do that. And if you're having problems, gut issues, and you're finding that you might be sensitive to some foods, it's something to consider. Take into consideration that you might have the genetics where you don't break down histamines well or eliminate them well. There are two different genes for that, okay? And so understanding which one can be super helpful in understanding the best way to go about working with your condition and your food sensitivities. Let's see, what was I going to say? Certain foods, just normal foods, hard cheeses tend to be higher in histamines. Some nuts and some legumes can be higher in histamines. Wine and alcohol can be higher in histamines. So, histamines, if you're having histamine reaction, think about it as a little bit of an allergic reaction. Think about it. So if you scratch your skin and it gets puffy and red, then you have a higher histamine response. The swelling from a mosquito bite is a histamine response. The reddening of your cheeks if you drink wine is a histamine response. Mucus formation and those kinds of things can be a histamine response. But then it can go into achiness and fatigue and brain fog and joint pain and things like that. So it can really be all over the board. So addressing it as as low or as going as, what's my word? Going as low as genetics or, as deep as genetics, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That can be a great thing. But then just understanding your body and what your body can handle and not handle. But you shouldn't be in a situation for an extended period of time where you can't tolerate histamines. Again, there's something else going on. You always want to know what else is going on. Some other symptoms of histamine intolerance would be hypertension, irregular sleep patterns, frequent headaches, tissue swelling, dizziness, anxiety, unstable body temperature, nausea, flushing, nasal congestion, abnormal menstrual cycle, hives, and fatigue. So it can be a problem. I do see it in practice. I've only had a couple of pretty extreme cases. But it's there. And so there are things that we can do about it while we're learning to work with the gut. So we're repairing the gut so we're not having such reactions. If we're looking at genetics and understanding if we don't eliminate or if we don't break down histamines well, or if we don't eliminate them well. And there are supplements for both. The breakdown of histamines, there are things like quercetin, whereas the elimination is an enzyme called DAO, and they have those supplements that you can take. And I hope I don't have that flip-flopped. I think I have that right. All right, oops. Let's move on to what can we do? So there are a number of things that we can do. Personally, it was always starting with the gut, but I don't go straight to food sensitivity testing Now, if there is somebody comes to me with, most people who come to me have already been through food allergy testing, which I think is great. I do very little food allergy testing. Actually, I don't think I've ever done a food allergy test, because that's kind of the first direction people go. When you're having symptoms, and the redness and these achiness and things like that, you go to your doctor and you have a food allergy test. And it's a smart thing to do. It takes you start to understand your body a little bit more. So my goal is to do food sensitivity testing. But everybody's different, right? We're looking at environment. We're looking at health issues, both current and historical issues, family history, and there's such complex interactions with the body and nutrition and stress and lifestyle factors. So much of this stuff is involved that it's really, it's sitting down and kind of taking the pieces and parts, taking everything apart so you know how to put it back together, if that makes sense. Because we can't take it apart and work with it individually, because we are not little pieces and parts, right? We are one full person, and we react with all of our surroundings. And so it's important to have a good understanding, a deep understanding, by doing any kind of testing that we can do, and then looking at the symptoms and the functions of the body, and that kind of thing. I hope that makes sense. Let's see. There are a number of tools that we can use, that I use a lot in practice when we're trying to understand what's going on and why it's going on. And then those can help us determine what's the best protocol for helping to repair whatever the issue is, or bring balance to the body, which is always the goal. Okay, so understanding personal and family medical history. We can do urine, saliva, blood, and stool analysis, which those are all amazing tools. We can do nutrient and stress profiles, genetic testing, allergy testing, hormone testing, mind, body, and so much more. I mean, that's the whole point of functional nutrition, functional medicine, is looking at the entirety of you, your surroundings, who you are, who your family is, everything about you, and creating balance in the whole picture as much as possible, right? We're not just going to say, you have a runny nose, we're going to treat your sinusitis or whatever. I mean, I don't do that, but we want to understand the whole thing so we can dig from the bottom up. If you're thinking about a tree, we want to look and work with the roots, whatever's going on with the roots. So everything up top and the leaves and the branches, those can take care of themselves. That's always the hope. All right, so let's talk about testing. This is one of my very favorite things, because I'm a little bit of a nerd. I'm going to see if there are any other questions. Okay. I enjoy the heck out of testing because I love data. Testing is not 100%. There are many factors that go into testing, and there are false negatives and false positives, but it is a super, super handy tool. It can give us a lot of really great information, and it's a huge part of my practice. So understanding how the body is truly functioning through essentially your body speaking to us in numbers on a piece of paper is it's just really amazing, the information that we can get. So I want to talk about kind of the I don't know, the way that I go about thinking about doing testing, because there are a lot of people, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, who will do food sensitivity testing first. And I have been there when I first started practicing, like, let's look at food sensitivities. The problem is that's not the underlying cause. Food sensitivities aren't the underlying cause. Food sensitivities are more of a symptom. And so why are we having food sensitivities? And that's what we need to figure out. And so my typical one is a couple of my first tests that I do is going to be a stool test. We need to understand if there is some kind of immune dysfunction going on in the gut, if there are inflammatory markers in the gut, if there's bacterial overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, if there are parasites, I've seen them. All of those things are really important. And so we can look, even if there are not a lot of parasites or not a lot of bad bacterial overgrowth, but we may have our own good bacteria is low. And so having that in check is just really important, because our microbiome is a huge part of who we are. And so if I do move into food sensitivity testing, it's going to be antibody testing, and it's looking to see how the body is reacting to the foods that come into the body. Again, it's not 100%, but it's a great tool. One of the most amazing things when we're looking at the particular test that I do is it can show us for certain foods, not all foods, but certain foods that matter, if we're having an antibody reaction that actually is attacking our own tissue. That is key. So those are probably the things that we need to stay away from the longest, if not forever. So say if gluten, there's a transglutaminase that can actually show us that our body is producing antibodies against the gluten that is attacking our own tissue. There are also certain things that can attack our brain tissue. So these are amazing as far as I'm concerned. And you know, I had a client, there's a component called butyrofalin that's in milk. It's in all milk, camel milk, horse milk, it doesn't matter. And we did food sensitivity, we did this test on her, found out she's sensitive to butyrofalin, and butyrofalin is creating antibodies against her brain. She will never ever do dairy again because it's that big a deal. So it's amazing the things that we can get from these labs. So let's see what else we want to talk about. I think that's kind of it as far as testing is concerned. I want to make sure, I guess my goal is to make sure that you understand that we don't, in my practice, most of the time, not always, I don't go straight for food sensitivity testing. But we can look at genetics, we can look at histamines, we can look at potential sensitivities toward gluten and dairy and genetics. I mean, there are lots of resources to help us understand what's going on with your gut. The stool test, by the way, can also show us if there's potential for leaky gut, which is really helpful in helping us determine a protocol to help with whatever the issues are, including food sensitivities. Okay, let's see, moving on. So one of the things that we can do, and I do fairly regularly in practice, is just doing an elimination diet. It is a little bit tedious and you have to be really committed to it. But it's a great thing. It's a great way of understanding your body and learning who you are and how you deal with foods. And when you find that you react to foods, you leave them out for 3 months or 6 months, or maybe even longer. You know, I truly believe that most people should not have our conventional gluten because it's so inflammatory because of the way we've hybridized it. But it's not that way with all foods. I've had people come back with food sensitivity tests that were all red. Why is that? It's not because they're reacting to the foods, it's because their immune system is completely upregulated. So we need to understand what the labs mean, what to do about it, and understand that there are lots of tiny little details in there, and many that I am still learning myself. You know, I'm always consulting with physicians on these labs to make sure that what I'm seeing is the right thing. So there's so much to learn, and so that's the best part about it, especially when I consult with the physicians. I get so much information, and it just makes me that much better of a practitioner. You know, there are certain things that we want to make sure that we eliminate when it comes to an elimination diet. And basically, a lot of the things we've already talked about, but it's going to be dairy, gluten, soy, corn, and eggs. Those things are the top as far as sensitivities are concerned. So many people are sensitive to these things, and they don't know it. And so these things are sort of the most important to take out of the diet. And maybe even if you just want to play with the elimination diet, you know, it's going to take longer. But if you take just those things out, then that in and of itself might just be your telltale, right? Okay, I found out that I'm super sensitive to gluten and dairy, or to gluten and corn. You keep those out and things are a lot better. So that's a great place to start. Other things though are refined sugars, peanuts, red meat, alcohol, caffeine, hydrogenated oils, which you should never have anyway. I mean, some of these things are things that you just shouldn't have in your diet anyway because they are just not healthy and they're inflammatory. Hydrogenated oils are the devil, hands down. So pay attention to those. And so is refined sugar. And then packaged and processed foods, again, those, the devil. There's, in most cases, not all, most cases, packaged and processed foods are not going to have any nutrient density and not going to do you any good. All right. There are some companies who have some packaged and processed foods, or maybe it's just more packaged, not processed, but packaged foods that are whole foods, right? And they're going to be more nutrient dense. And so we can look at them and say, oh, I can see that that's actually lettuce and not just something that's in a, you know, a square that's bound together, you know, like a cracker. But anyway, let's see. And then of course, if you have done a food sensitivity test, you can eliminate those things that have come out red for you, or if you want to do the red and the yellow, you can do that as well. Food sensitivity tests come back, most of them, they come back in green, yellow, or red being the worst, yellow being moderate, and green meaning no sensitivity to it. So it really depends on how many come back, because you can have a few red and a lot yellow, and it can really decrease the amount of food that you're taking in. And a lot of times, just, you know, as you begin to repair your gut and balance your body, a lot of those will go away anyway. Okay, so you might want to consider eliminating FODMAPs for a short period of time to see if you are reacting to a lot of the FODMAPs. Then you know you probably have some, you potentially have some form of SIBO, or you have SIBO. That's kind of a telltale sign, but you know, not the end all be all. But also the histamine containing foods, you can think about reducing those and see if you react to those. You can also look at nightshades. I had a client who was doing really well and he was eating well, and he called me up and he said, I can't figure out what's wrong with me. I'm eating what you told me to eat and I'm still having problems. And his breakfast consisted of eggs, peppers, and I think it was peppers and tomatoes. Anyway, I told him, it's like, okay, take out the nightshades. Took out the nightshades and he was fine. Some people react to nightshades. It can be a problem for people. So that might be something that you consider taking out as well. Let's see, what else can we talk about? So the things that you do want to include in an elimination diet, I make it sound really simplistic, but really it is. Good healthy meat, lots and lots and lots of vegetables, right? So keeping in mind, if you have sensitivities, if you want to avoid FODMAPs, if you need to avoid nightshades, right? So it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of prep to understand what your goal is and what you're trying to do and what an elimination diet looks like for you. That's why I do what I do, right? I work through these things with each of my clients, and you know, it's kind of me doing the hard work, but it's the work I love. So, you know, but for you, you know, if it's not something that you're used to doing, it take a little bit of time to really get a plan together and understand it, and prepping for it. So having the food, going to the grocery store, having food available, so so you're not miserable. It can take a little bit of time to really get in the groove, and so just be prepared for it. But it can be really, really useful. It can be really useful. So if it's something that you need to do, jump on it. Other things that you might consider including, it's, again, it goes back to, you know, each person. So my list here has gluten-free grains. Sure, that could be great, but if you have cross-reactivity with gluten-free grains and gluten, that might not be your best friend, right? You might want to keep grains out as well. Typically when I do an elimination diet, you know, in the beginning, I don't do any grains. I don't do any nightshades. I don't do, mine's pretty limited. So it's limited to healthy fat, healthy meat, healthy vegetable, a little bit of fruit. So it's, again, a little bit simplistic, and you want to get your list together. My list also says dairy substitutes. Probably the only thing that I would be totally on board with as far as a dairy substitute is going to be coconut milk out of a can, unless you make your own. I don't like the coconut milks in a carton. I don't think they have good nutrients in them. I think they're mostly water, and they have added nutrients that we don't need. You know, vitamin D2, we don't utilize vitamin D2. It doesn't make any sense, but they still put it in there. I'm not sure why. Things like carrageenan, which can cause GI distress. It can also be a potential carcinogen. You know, so, you know, look at your ingredients, look at your labels, keep the labels to a minimum. And coconut milk out of a can has coconut and water and maybe some guar gum, which for some people with SIBO, guar gum is not a good thing. It can upset their GI. So again, it can be a lot, but it's stuff that you keep in mind for your situation, or you find somebody to help you with this, okay? Let's see, fresh vegetables minus corn. I would say potentially minus nightshades or minus FODMAPs, depending on what your goal is. Whole fruits, clean animal protein. So wild game is great. Pastured is always, always the best. Okay, so pasture raised, 100% grass fed. High quality oils, coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil. Don't cook with olive oil, but olive oil is great. Herbal teas. There are some sweetener alternatives that you might consider. There is monk fruit if you need a little bit of sweetener. There's monk fruit. There's also, you could do probably a little bit of raw honey. There's another one, oh, stevia. Stevia is a good one. It's just a plant-based sweetener. And then lots of spices. Okay, so, but look at your spices. If you're avoiding nightshades, you know, anything that's a pepper, except for black pepper, is a nightshade. So your cayenne, what's the word? Anyway, any of your peppers are, and spices, curries have peppers in them. So those are going to have nightshades in them. I think we might be at the end of our food sensitivity and allergy webinar or Facebook Live. So I hope that if you have questions, you'll let me know. I am going to do this again on another topic. We're going to spread it out kind of like we did this time. I'm thinking maybe fertility is what we might do next. So I haven't quite decided yet, but hoping to start on that next week. So please let me know if you have questions. You can go to my website, tastelifenutrition.com. You can go to my Facebook page. You can reach out to me with any questions that you have. Also, on my website, there is an assessment. I know I've said this before, but you can go to that assessment, fill it out. It just takes 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and it comes straight to me. I will reach out to you, and then we'll talk about the assessment and kind of see what I can do to help you, or maybe give you some guidance. Or if you need to set up an appointment, then that's what we'll do as well. So have a great day and have a great weekend, and we'll see y'all later on. Thanks.